So, the story of the film begins in 1974, where we see a very white house in the Reagan estate. In this house, there was a little girl. The girl sees a car coming and goes outside with her Polaroid camera, where a strange man calls her from behind. This man was very pale, so pale that it looked like there wasn't any blood in his body, which made him incredibly creepy. The man tells the girl, "It's almost your birthday," and then laughs in an eerie way. Throughout this entire sequence, we can't see the man's face clearly, and the scene cuts here. From here, the story jumps 20 years ahead to 1990. The episode begins with a newly recruited FBI agent named Lee Harker. Lee, along with her fellow FBI agent, goes to track a criminal, and somehow, Lee senses that the criminal is inside a random house. She tells this to her partner, but he doesn't take Lee's words seriously. Still, he checks the house Lee pointed out, and, to his surprise, the criminal was actually inside and shoots and kills the agent. Here, Lee sums up the situation. She forces the criminal to surrender at gunpoint, and the scene cuts. In the next scene, we see Lee taking a psychological and numbers test, and then we see her with a very senior agent, Carter. From their conversation, we understand that Lee has incredible intuition, like a sixth sense. It's called clay sense, and Agent Carter believes that Lee is definitely half psychic, which is why she did so well in the numbers and psychological test. She performed so well that, in the last case, Lee had automatically figured out the address of the criminal's house. Because of this, Carter hands over a cold case to Lee that had been open for several years with no clues. The case was given to Lee with the hope that she might find something new, allowing them to reopen it. In this case, victims had been murdered for years, and in every instance, the father would first lose his temper, kill his wife and daughter, and then kill himself too. The murders were carried out so brutally that the husband would stab his wife over 60 times, continuing until the knife broke. At every crime scene, a strange cryptic letter was found, written in some kind of code. These letters seemed satanic, and each one had the word Longlegs written on it, suggesting that Longlegs had written the letters. The handwriting of the letters didn't match with any of the victims, so it was obvious that someone else, named Longlegs, had been behind the murders and the letters. But the question remained, who is Longlegs? Lee takes all the documents from the case and begins her investigation. It's revealed that in every case, there's a clue indicating someone else was inside the house, but there was no sign of forced entry. So, it's safe to say that in each case, the father went mad and killed his entire family. However, in every case, a letter from Longlegs was found, suggesting these murders were somehow orchestrated by Longlegs without them ever entering the house. Let's deduce a few more things. In every victim's family, there was always a 9-year-old girl, and each girl's birthday was on the 14th. The month might vary, but the date was always the 14th. In fact, the murders happened either 6 days before or after the girl's birthday. Lee shared all her findings with Agent Kadak, and on that day, she also met Kadak's family. Kadak's wife was there, and so was his younger daughter, Ruby, who invited Lee to her birthday party. Later that night, Lee felt like someone was outside her house, but when she checked, she didn't find anyone. However, viewers can clearly see someone walking into Lee's house. When Lee goes back inside, she finds a novelty card, which was a birthday card. Using the writing from the card and the 9 circles of help book, Lee decodes Longlegs' cryptic letters. The next day, the FBI learns about another massacre. The family had planned a trip about a month ago, and they were killed while sleeping in the master bedroom. The neighbors assumed they were on vacation, so no one checked on them. As usual, Longlegs had left a letter at the scene. Since Lee had already cracked Longlegs' cipher, she easily translated the letter. She then marked the dates of each murder on a linear calendar. After doing this, she discovered the shape of an inverted triangle, which was clearly a symbol of the devil. To complete this pattern, only one date was missing, the 13th. This meant Longlegs would strike again in a few days on the 13th. At this point, Lee shared her new findings with Agent Carter. She also pointed out that Longlegs repeatedly mentioned in his letters how much he enjoyed the Cameron family murders. The Cameron family was one of Longlegs' early victims, dating back to 1974. However, this case was a bit different because Dr. Carey had somehow survived and was now in a mental institution. Lee and Carter visit the Cameron family farm, where they find a life-size doll that looks exactly like a young Carey, and they immediately have the doll examined and discover it is handmade. They are surprised to see how beautifully and intricately it was crafted. The doll's head features a halo made of metal, and there is also a metal orb that doesn't seem to make sense. Strangely, the orb emitted vibrations that seemed to be controlled. Feeling these vibrations, Lee experiences strange psychic visions where she sees Longlegs with the dolls. The person examining the doll even mentions feeling pain when he gets close to it. Hearing the name of his ex-wife, Lee quickly deduces that every victim's family must have received a life-sized doll resembling the daughter of the house. Despite her bold claim, Agent Carter initially rejects Lee's theory, refusing to believe it. At this point, the scene shifts to a creepy man, the same long-legged man we saw at the beginning of the movie. We see him walking out of a shop in a bizarre way. In the video, he is seen buying some items, and we understand that he's headed to visit someone in his car. After this, Leo Carter goes to visit Carrie, who is in a mental institution, and he learns that Carrie has been in the hospital for the past 20 years. She has been in a strange mental state for years, unaware of her surroundings, not speaking or hearing anything. But suddenly, just a day ago, she became somewhat normal. Not only that, but for the first time in 20 years, Carrie started talking. Carrie tells them, "Someone came to see me yesterday, and whoever it was had written their name in the visitor's register." Based on this whole situation, we can guess that Longlegs came to visit Carrie, made her normal, and knows her, which is why he wrote Lee's name in the register. Of course, this made Carter suspicious of Lee, because there seemed to be some connection between Longlegs and Lee. However, Lee asks Carrie a few questions, but Carrie isn't answering clearly. From Carrie's cryptic words, we as viewers can definitely understand that Carrie knows something and could potentially help with finding Longlegs. Carrie even hints that Longlegs' face looks familiar to her and that Lee is somehow connected to everything. She just has to remember her forgotten past. Carrie also reveals how the murders in her house took place. As usual, her father killed her mother and himself. By this point, Carter had a strong feeling that Lee was connected to the Longlegs case. In fact, Carter finds in old records that on January 13, 1974, Lee's mother, Ruth, had filed a police report saying that a strange, pale, white man had come to their house and was talking to young Lee, who was 9 years old at the time. Even though this complaint was never pursued, it showed some kind of connection. Especially since Lee's birthday is also on January 14th. Yes, January 14th, and in 1974, Lee was also 9 years old. With these strong connections, Carter tells Lee to visit her mother's house and check old belongings to help her remember anything from her childhood. Lee immediately goes to her mother Ruth's house, and from their conversation, we can tell there is some tension in their relationship. Ruth asks Lee if she prays, and when Lee says no, Ruth laughs strangely. At home, Lee finds a box with some Polaroid photos. At this point, we as viewers realize that the little girl seen in the opening scene of the movie was Lee. Lee had seen Longlegs as a child and even took a picture of him with her Polaroid camera. Now Lee can finally get a clear picture of Longlegs. Lee asks her mother Ruth about January 13th, 1974, but Ruth says she doesn't remember anything. However, from Ruth's expression, it's clear she's hiding something. Through flashbacks, we are shown that Ruth had indeed called the police that day after seeing Longlegs. In fact, Ruth had confronted Longlegs, asking him what he was doing near her daughter. Longlegs just laughed strangely here, leaving us wondering what Ruth and Lee were doing at that time. How did they survive? Longlegs is the one who has been serially killing so many people, so how did Ruth and Lee escape that situation? Don't worry, this mystery won't remain unsolved for the rest of the movie. It will be revealed soon. Anyway, Lee had now gotten the photo of Longlegs and gave it to Carter. Soon after, the police arrested Longlegs with the help of this photo. Longlegs behaved strangely during interrogation, and it was clear to the police that this man was a devil worshipper. A policewoman even says a funny line here: "Worshipping the devil isn't a crime in America, so we can't arrest him on that basis." Whatever the case, Longlegs was caught, and his handwriting matched the letters. All the evidence was in place, so the case seemed closed. But Lee now felt that Longlegs couldn't have done this alone. Remember, there was no forced entry into any of the victims' houses, so how were the letters found inside? To confirm her theory, Lee goes to question Longlegs. From his gestures, it was clear that he knew Lee very well. Longlegs says, "I serve the man downstairs," meaning he works for someone who lives below. Downstairs here could mean hell or the underworld, indicating that Longlegs works for the devil. Lee, convinced someone else was helping Longlegs with these murders, asks who it is. Longlegs responds, "Why don't you ask your mother?" Then Longlegs shouts, "Hail Satan," and takes his own life by smashing his head against the table right in front of Lee. Lee is shocked by this. Carter is furious, blaming Lee for pushing Longlegs too hard, thinking that maybe her insistence on him having a partner triggered his suicide. At the same time, Carrie also commits suicide in the mental institution. Carrie, overwhelmed by these mental pressures, gave up her life. Longlegs' connection to Lee's mother was undeniable, so Lee goes back to her mother Ruth's home with Agent Browning. Lee enters the house but sees her mother, dressed like a nun, outside the window holding a shotgun. Agent Browning is shot dead. Yes, friends, Ruth kills him. Lee immediately notices her childhood self, appearing as her 9-year-old self, in the reflection. Lee begins to understand that Longlegs' partner was none other than her mother, Ruth. Lee tells Ruth that Longlegs is dead. Upon hearing this, Ruth responds, "Longlegs is now free, and you are free too." With that, she blows off the head of Lee's doll with her shotgun. As a result, the metal inside the doll explodes, and black smoke begins to rise from it. Right after this, Lee feels as if dark magic or smoke has engulfed her, and she collapses unconscious on the spot. From here, we're taken to the past through Ruth's narration, helping us understand what happened on January 13th, 1974. On that day, Longlegs, whose real name is Dale Coble and who is a doll maker by profession, met 9-year-old Lee. Ruth, creeped out by him, reported him to the police. Time passed for Longlegs, but he eventually came back, tied up Ruth, and gave her a choice. The choice was simple. If Ruth allowed him in, fine, but if not, he would continue to visit her repeatedly, eventually killing Lee. From that point on, Ruth became Longlegs' partner. You might wonder why Longlegs chose Ruth and Lee. Well, Lee's father wasn't exactly an ideal man. Whenever Longlegs targeted a family, the father would end up going insane, killing the entire family. Although Lee's birthday was on the 14th, her father wasn't home, so Longlegs took advantage of this situation, making Ruth his accomplice. Now, let me explain how these murders happened. Longlegs would make life-size dolls and place a satanic metal sphere inside each one. The vibes from this sphere were powerful enough to drive the father of any family mad, leading him to murder his wife, then his daughter, and finally commit suicide. How were these dolls delivered to the victims? This is where Ruth came in. She would dress as a nun and go to the victims' houses, telling them they had won a prize in a church contest. Since it was a gift from the church, the families never suspected anything. The gift was, of course, the life-size doll, which looked exactly like their 9-year-old daughter. The package also included a letter, usually from Longlegs. Once the family opened the package, the father would lose his mind and kill everyone. We can say that every doll Longlegs made was imbued with evil powers. In fact, the doll he made for Lee was the reason she couldn't remember much of her childhood. Yes, friends, Lee was so confused that she never realized Longlegs had been living in her mother's basement, making dolls. So, when Lee's doll was finally destroyed, all her memories came back because the satanic metal orb had been shattered. It was this orb's magic that had caused Lee to fall unconscious earlier. Remember when Longlegs said, "I serve the man downstairs"? Well, in a literal sense, Ruth was also serving a man downstairs, as Longlegs lived in the basement of Ruth's house. We can infer that Longlegs represented the devil in some way. However, Longlegs' work wasn't finished, as one family was still left to be murdered. Once that murder occurred, the inverted triangle pattern would be complete. Lee eventually regains consciousness and receives a phone call at her mother's house. The voice on the other end says that she'll miss Ruby's birthday party. The voice sounded like Longlegs, but since he's dead, we can assume it was either the devil himself or a manifestation in Ruby's mind. The meaning of the call, however, was clear. Ruby and her family, none other than Agent Katak's family, were the next targets. Yes, friends, Ruby's birthday was also on the 14th. Realizing this, Lee immediately heads to Katak's house. Upon arriving, she discovers that her mother Ruth had already entered the house, dressed as a nun, and was holding a gift in her hand. The package's wrapper was already torn, which means the doll had been opened. Yes, friends, Lee tries to convince Carter, but we see that Carter is already in a bad mood and isn't listening to her. It was clear that the doll's influence had started to take effect on Carter. Not long after, Carter kills his wife with a knife and then moves toward Ruby to kill her. But Lee shoots Carter, killing him on the spot. Now, Ruth sees that Ruby has survived, and without Ruby's death, the triangle of Longlegs will not be complete, which the devil desires. Praising the doll, Ruth moves toward Ruby to kill her. In such a desperate situation, Lee is forced to shoot her own mother. She then takes Ruby away from the doll and points her gun at it. At this moment, Lee is visibly triggered and pulls the trigger, but the bullet doesn't fire. This could be because the gun is either out of bullets or the safety lock is on. The point is that the doll isn't destroyed, and Lee tells Ruby, "We have to get out of here." Then, we see Ruby and Lee standing in the same spot. It appears that Lee is rocking a standing doll, as if she's in a trance or frozen. Parallel to this, we see Longlegs in some interrogation clips, where he's laughing like crazy. In the end, Longlegs says, "Hail Satan," and the movie ends.